Marketplace is next. Tonight on the show, the constant stream of messages and emails from colleagues can feel a bit overwhelming at work.
Emails and chatting on the team channel and following the Asana and our software program. I just couldn't get through all of it in a day.
The challenges to communication in hybrid and remote work. That's next on Marketplace. We'll have more, all things considered, at 7.
Support for WNYC comes from Roadside Attractions presenting Beyond Utopia, the new film about two North Korean families' escape from oppression and their journey towards freedom, directed by Madeline Gavin, in theaters November 3rd at the IFC Center.
WNYC, independent journalism in the public interest. 93.9 FM and AM 820. NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Marketplace is supported by Baird, dedicated to attracting and retaining talent from across the financial industry, providing continuity for clients. More at BairdDifference.com.
Jay Powell leads the program today in exactly 5 words. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by JLL, whose offerings are backed by global data and intelligence, which can reveal unique opportunities for investors in commercial real estate. JLL.com. See a brighter way. And by Amazon Business, helping provide a smarter, easier way to get the supplies businesses need to thrive. Amazon Business, your partner for smart business buying. And by Pi Insurance, helping small businesses thrive with commercial insurance designed to be as easy as pie, so you can get back to business. Learn more from your agent or at iwantpie.com.
In Los Angeles, I'm Kai Ryssdal. It is Wednesday today, November the 1st. Good as always to have you along, everybody. Fed Chair Jay Powell used 7,561 words in his post-meeting press conference today, talking about this economy, where the central bank thinks it's going, and how he and his colleagues are thinking about interest rates. Of those 7,561 words, 5 rise to the top. We shall take them one by one. Here you go.
Inflation remains well above.
Inflation, it is simply too high for the Fed's liking, and Powell says they're going to keep on doing what it takes to get it to their target, 2%. No surprise there. Next.
Monetary policy.
Monetary policy is the fancy Fed way of saying interest rates, which aligns closely with
Really restrictive at 5.25%.
Restrictive, which you can take to mean designed to slow the economy down. Here it is. In a sentence, that might help. The central bank will keep policy restrictive to bring inflation down to its target of 2%. Okay, next.
Is the labor market continuing?
As in the labor market, the thing Powell and company have been trying to get to cool off with all of their rate hikes the past year and a half. We get an update Friday, by the by, with the October unemployment report. Okay, finally, now for what Jay Powell is thinking in exactly 5 words.
The risk is that.
Risk. This is the whole smash for the Fed right now. The risk that if they take their foot off the economic brake, if you will, that restrictive policy stance, inflation is going to pick back up. Powell went for an hour in his press conference today. We did it in a minute and a half. There you go. Elsewhere in American capitalism, by which I mean the corner of Wall Street and Broad in Lower Manhattan, it's all good. We'll have the details when we do the numbers. Okay, with the Fed summarily dispatched, we are going to turn now to something called the quarterly refunding statement. Basically, the Treasury Department telling the world today how much debt, how many billions of dollars worth of bonds it is going to need to issue to keep the U.S. government up and running. $776 billion in new borrowing through the quarter, $112 billion in bonds next week, says Treasury. Demand for those bonds is going to dictate the yield that they pay, and the yield that those bonds pay is going to affect rates on mortgages and car loans and a whole lot of other stuff. It is a big, complicated machine, the debt market is. We talk about it all the time. But the thing is, the buyers for those bonds, well, it's just not who it used to be. And that matters a lot in this economy right now. Here's Marketplace's Matt Levin.
All types of institutions buy U.S. Treasuries because they're still a safe asset. Banks, foreign governments, pension funds. But amongst those buyers, over the last decade or so, there's been one 500-pound gorilla, or a $4.9 trillion gorilla if you measure by the amount of treasuries it still owns.
It's the U.S. Federal Reserve.
Brandon Swenson is a bond specialist at Blue Bay Asset Management. The Fed started buying U.S. debt after the Great Recession, and then lots more after COVID to stimulate the economy, aka quantitative easing. But because of inflation, the Fed now wants to slow down the economy. So it basically stopped buying treasuries last year, aka quantitative tightening.
A mechanism that they are relying on to tighten monetary policy and hopefully bring inflation back down to that 2% target.
The Fed isn't the only big buyer bowing out of the Treasury market. Major U.S. banks are also buying less than they used to. In the wake of the failure of Silicon Valley Bank, many are struggling with a smaller deposit base and just have less money to invest, says Marvin Lowe at State Street.
They need to reduce some of the asset side of their businesses, and they're looking at doing it by slowing and reducing their overall Treasury holdings.
Some foreign governments like China have also curtailed their treasury purchases recently. All told, less demand means higher bond yields, and interest on the 10-year T-note is still flirting with 16-year highs. But there's a new opportunistic buyer that has stepped into the picture, hedge funds. Daryl Duffy is an economist at Stanford.
Hedge funds indeed have been taking large speculative positions in U.S. Treasuries, now on the order of $2 trillion. They're one of the largest groups of owners.
Duffy says interest rates might be even higher if not for hedge funds, but their unregulated presence may lead to unwanted volatility in what should be the safest, most liquid bond market in the world. I'm Matt Levin for Marketplace.
Okay, here's a sort of work-related PSA. Nobody reads your emails. All right, not nobody, but there's a good chance that plenty of people who you might think read them don't. Nearly half of workers say they've missed important deadlines and meetings because they don't pay enough attention to their inboxes. Now, mind you, this data comes from Slack, the work chat platform that benefits from people using its service instead of email. Still, and although this gets to something bigger going on in the workplace, especially in the increasingly digital, increasingly remote workplace. Between email and Zoom, Teams and Slack and whatnot, all the alerts can be overwhelming and can actually make us less productive. Marketplace's Kristen Schwab looks at how, in the search to streamline communication, we have created chaos.
At some point a couple years ago, Susan Hoy felt like she was being buried alive under a pile of texts, emails, and chats. Every morning, she'd wake up at 4:30, open her eyes, grab her phone, and from her bed, while it was still dark, she'd scroll through the messages.
I had a lot coming at me all the time between emails and chatting on the team channel and our software program. I just couldn't get through all of it in a day.
Hoy owns a small business called Nevada Guardian Services in Las Vegas. Basically, it's an agency that helps manage the lives of people who can't manage themselves, people who are sick, dealing with memory loss, or struggle with severe mental health challenges, which means she's constantly juggling conversations with attorneys, physicians, family members, and employees.
Most of our job is communication. It absolutely is.
But ever since her workplace went hybrid, the number of messages grew, and they were coming at her from a bunch of different platforms. It created a lot of anxiety, and not just for her, but also for her employees.
Literally, I have a staff member who would come into my office and say, "Did you see that email I just sent you?" Like, no, I did not. There was this lack of this trust.
Also, a lack of concentration. In the last 20 years, our attention span at work has drastically shrunk from 2.5 minutes to less than 50 seconds as we bounce from spreadsheets to Zoom to Slacks. That's according to Gloria Mark, who wrote Attention Span, a book about work in the digital age. She says these platforms have increased productivity, but they can also get in the way.
Electronic communications have expanded the scope of work. So it's given us additional work above and beyond other duties that we have.
More messages means more time responding and less time doing important tasks. She says that's become an exponentially bigger problem with remote work because when you need to talk to someone, you can't see them. There are no physical cues, like someone closing their office door or wearing headphones to signal they're busy.
You never know when to interrupt people. And so we interrupt others at a time that suits us.
Maybe because we're not aware of the moment, or because we're sort of information dumping so we can check to-dos off our lists, or because since no one sees us working, we want to tell them. We are.
And this might be manifest by sending additional emails or additional Slack messages.
Of course, these platforms aren't going anywhere. So how do we get from that meme, "This meeting could have been an email," to efficiency? Ellen Fay is a productivity coach in Florida.
Put your phone across the room. Turn off your email. Turn off all your notifications.
Fay says, yeah, you might not be able to control the fact that your boss is a chaotic communicator, but you don't have to be. For instance, Fay says instead of impulsively slacking a coworker, keep a list of updates to give them all at once.
And then what I have seen is once one person does that in the organization, it kind of has a ripple effect.
That's how things worked for Susan Hoy in Nevada. She started a no inter-office email policy. Inboxes are now only for communicating with people outside the business. Everything else happens in Microsoft Teams.
I had to really retrain my thought process that nobody needs a response from me on an email while I'm laying in bed.
She says it's cut her inbox down to 40 emails a day. The average worker gets around 120. I'm Kristen Schwab for Marketplace.
Here's a notification you should not turn off. The day's business and economic news from David Brancaccio and the gang at the Marketplace Morning Report. Everything you need to know to start your economic day.